Long after a bill designed to give more power to victims of decades-old sexual abuse cases stalled at the State House.
If we want these institutions to be healthy, we have to have transparency.
Those in support of change now wonder, was it all for show?
Bills are always introduced for a number of reasons. Sometimes they're introduced to get leverage. Sometimes they're introduced to start a conversation.
Some of the victims who haven't stopped calling for change now accuse those elected to serve of not taking their cries for help seriously.
It's infuriating. It just makes you feel like that we're just pawns in this game of people.
Some lawmakers are looking to provide more exemptions in Ohio to widespread vaccine mandates. They're calling for fairness, but some in the business sector say it goes too far.
These exemptions would make such an employer's vaccination requirements meaningless.
And do debates matter anymore? Our all-star roundtable on why candidates from both parties are shying away from the debate stage. Now on the Spectrum.
The longest-running political show in Central Ohio starts now. This is NBC4's The Spectrum with Colleen Marshall.
A shocking revelation this week for victims of sexual assault at the hands of Ohio State University Dr. Richard Strauss. After waiting 2 years for state lawmakers to take action on House Bill 249 to suspend the statute of limitations and allow their legal claims against OSU to move forward, the House Majority Leader admits the bill was a sham. In an email to one of the victims, Republican leader Bill Seitz said, "I do not support a resurrection of HB 249. All along," he says, HB 249 was intended to apply pressure to Ohio State to come to the table and make meaningful settlement offers. Seitz called the bill itself, though, flawed and said lawmakers never really wanted to suspend the statute of limitations. Strauss victims tell me it's like being victimized all over again. But they tell me they're not giving up on changing the law. In fact, they're teaming up with another group of abuse victims, survivors of sexual assault by priests.
Today I'm asking you to send the survivors a strong message that Ohio's leaders will no longer look the other way. And let's send Ohio State a message, too, that time doesn't undo the damage inflicted when predators like Dr. Strauss are given free rein to abuse young people, and the law shouldn't either.
As his parents and friends looked on, Stephen Snyder-Hill testified at a State House hearing on House Bill 249, detailing how and when he was sexually assaulted by OSU Dr. Richard Strauss.
You know, you sit there and you pour your heart out and tell your story to these lawmakers, and to have him say that there was never any intent for that law to do anything other than to budge Ohio State, it's infuriating. It just makes you feel like that we're just pawns in this game of people.
Is that true? It was never intended to be passed?
Well, I can tell you, based on conversations with the bill sponsor, that his motive was to continue to apply pressure on Ohio State because the allegation was they were not mediating in good faith.
So lawmakers were trying to pressure OSU, but when he dismissed the victims' claims based on the statute of limitations, federal judge Michael Watson put pressure on lawmakers.
Our legal system failed you. He said that. Those were his words, that the legal system failed you, that OSU failed you, and now the legislators, it's in their court not to fail you.
And that's why Strauss victims were stunned to learn House Bill 249 that they hoped would suspend the statute of limitations was always doomed to fail.
Bills are always introduced for a number of reasons. Sometimes they're introduced to get leverage. Sometimes they're introduced to start a conversation. Sometimes they're introduced in hopes that they pass.
What should these victims make of the fact that they flew, some of them from different parts of the country, to testify for this bill? They hired a lobbyist. They had faith that this bill was going to honestly be considered, and you're saying lawmakers never intended to pass it. It was just a leverage point. Is that the way the system should work?
I didn't tell them to fly in from all over. People all the time fly in from all over to talk about their various pieces of legislation. But like I say, 85 to 90% of all the bills that are introduced in any given 2-year session do not become law. So I feel sorry if they incurred that expense, but no one in the General Assembly told them they should do that or that they had to do that. And so, they were not misled by me.
Site says this one was never meant to pass, and in his email pointed out that if it did, other abuse victims would then want the same help.
If you look around the country, you will find many, many Catholic dioceses that have gone bankrupt as a result of decisions in other states to suspend the statute of limitations. You will find that the Boy Scouts are paying out an unbelievable amount of money to settle claims. So I weigh and consider the good that these charitable institutions do against the need to preserve the statute of limitations and the need to afford meaningful compensation for victims. And I'm not prepared to open up what I think would be a can of worms just for the victims of Dr. Strauss, because it would lead to all of these other equally meritorious pleas for late justice.
So he's telling all of us constituents in Ohio that he's worried about protecting institutions that cover up rapists and predators. That's insane to me.
Site says the statute of limitations guards against faulty memories.
We want to see justice happen quickly because memories fade, evidence disappears over time. This is really, really great logic. However, when there's an issue of repression, it doesn't make any sense.
Chris Graham repressed the memory of being raped by a priest at the age of 14.
I didn't remember that when I ran from this priest, that someone saw me, that someone helped me escape until I got into therapy. And when I was able to go to the police and they were able to find her and she was able to corroborate my story.
Graham says traumatized victims can't always make their claims within the time allowed by the statute of limitations, which is why they're asking lawmakers for help.
This isn't a Republican issue. It's not a Democrat issue. This is about our children. And any bills that we want to see come forward, we want to see that as a joint effort between Republicans and Democrats. This isn't an opportunity for politics right now. This is an opportunity to prevent one of the worst crimes on the face of the planet from happening here in Columbus to our children.
Now, the victims of priests and victims of Dr. Strauss will work together.
We're 100% determined to unify and to get other people, other sexual assault survivors, to speak up and tell their stories. And we're going to demand that these lawmakers listen to us.
They're trying to unify sexual assault victims from all over the state to put pressure on the State House. Sure. Do you think that's going to be effective?
No.
And when organizations have enabled these sorts of these pedophiles, these serial rapists, we have to hold them accountable, or it opens the door wide open for more of these types of people to come into our society.
Last week, we shared my interview with State Representative and Democratic congressional candidate Allison Russo and told you that you would hear from her Republican counterpart, Mike Carey, this week. Carey canceled our interview about 2 hours before we were scheduled to talk on Wednesday and has not rescheduled despite several requests to his campaign. We have also been working to bring both candidates together for a debate sometime before the November 2nd election. So far, we have not been able to reach an agreement between all parties, and we are working to find ways to let you hear from both of them on issues most important to you. Coming up after the